The Great Wall stands as a symbol of power and pride, but it was built on the bodies of millions who are never recorded in history. Every stone, every brick, every mile of the Great Wall was laid not just on earth and rock, but on human flesh. Ordinary men, women, and children, swept up by the empire's demands, many of them never leaving a name behind. This story isn't about the Great Wall's glory. It's about its weight, the unbearable weight of lives ground down to build it. Who were these people? How did their lives become bound to this enormous wall? How did it feel to live and die at the Great Wall's foundation? Today, we're going beneath the stone, beneath the legend, to the most basic, most brutal layer of history. The foundation of the Great Wall is not just stone. It is human. Who exactly was built into the living, breathing foundation of the Great Wall? First, the farmers. They formed the largest and most silent group. The empire enforced a system of forced labor that treated human bodies and years of life as units of taxation. The moment a conscription order arrived, the rhythm of village life was torn apart. The fields still waited for spring planting and autumn harvest, but the people who tied to them were gone. Sent to a distant frontier, every able-bodied man, young or old, was given immediate orders to depart. They were allowed little more than meager rations and thin clothing. Under the watch of armed officers, they were marched toward a frontier from which many would never return. This was not a matter of personal choice, but a cold and impersonal act of state conscription. The loss of a single working man could shatter an entire household's survival, driving the family almost immediately into debt, hunger, or collapse. Yet in the empire's administrative records, these individuals, each with a family that depended on them, were stripped of their names and recorded only as categories such as garrison laborers or forced laborers, their lives absorbed without trace into the machinery of state statistics. Next came the soldiers, men who were expected not only to defend the frontier, but to build it with their own bodies. For many soldiers, service had no real end. Their labor was constant, often stretching across an entire lifetime, or continuing until their bodies were permanently broken. Bound by harsh military law, they bore the twin burdens of war and construction without reprieve. Their bodies no longer belonged to themselves. They became working components in the empire's defense machine, used until they wore out. At the very bottom were the prisoners and exiles. Across dynasties, men already condemned by the state were sent in chains to the frontier, where labor on the Great Wall served both as punishment and as a final extraction of value from their bodies. In the eyes of the law, their social lives had already ended. What remained was only flesh to be used. To administrators, they ranked lowest of all, housed in the harshest conditions and treated as labor that could be replaced without consequence, despite their different origins. All of these people met the same brutal equality at the foot of the Great Wall. None retained authority over their own bodies. Their lives were reorganized into military-style units such as teams, camps, and barracks, and under the cold supervision of guards and overseers, they were reduced to instruments of labor. To understand this is essential. The rise of the Great Wall was not a story of triumphant construction, but a centuries-long process of systematic human consumption, a vast machinery of exile and forced labor and death. When these bodies, already stripped of autonomy, finally gathered at the frontier worksites, they did not enter an ordinary construction site. They stepped into a place that operated with grim efficiency as a killing ground. Here, death lost any sense of accident or suddenness and became a predictable, ongoing condition of daily life. Here, destruction was not incidental, but routine, a daily process unfolding along three main paths. The first path was direct physical destruction, exhaustion, and accidents. The work itself was inherently lethal. In an era without heavy machinery or any meaningful protection, massive stones were quarried through crude methods of fire and water, unstable processes that frequently turned the landscape into a collapsing hazard. Bricks weighing hundreds of pounds were dragged up steep mountain paths entirely by human strength, each step taken under the constant risk of failure. Landslides, falling rocks, snapped ropes, and fatal plunges from cliffs were not exceptional tragedies but routine elements of the work environment. More common than sudden death was a slower destruction built into daily labor. Endless overwork wore the body down until it could no longer continue. A laborer who coughed blood from exhaustion was seldom treated, because by then his value to the work had already been spent. like a cracked brick judged unfit for the wall. He was taken out of the line and replaced with another body still capable of labor. Second came a quieter but more efficient form of killing, disease woven into daily life. More destructive than accidents was not a single outbreak, but the conditions that made illness constant. Hundreds of thousands were crammed into filthy, airless shelters, where human and animal waste fouled the soil and water. Contagion did not arrive as an exception. It was always present. Dysentery, typhoid, epidemic fevers, malaria. Any surge could turn a camp into a field of the dying within days. The sick were not treated as patients but removed as burdens. Some were pushed into crude isolation huts. Others were left beyond the camp to die out of sight. Even without major epidemics, infected wounds, chronic diarrhea, and scurvy quietly killed those already weakened by hunger and exhaustion. Disease here was not an event. It was part of the air, the water, the ground. It worked like the labor itself, wearing people down until they were gone. Third came a slower collapse of the body's basic functions, hunger and climate. The food they were given was never enough, and often barely fit to eat. Moldy grain and coarse meal mixed with grit formed their daily diet. Hunger was not an emergency. It was a constant condition. At the same time, they faced the harshest environments of the empire's frontiers. Winters froze through clothing and flesh. In summer, prolonged heat exposure steadily stripped the body of moisture. On mountain ridges, cutting winds never stopped. Cold heat stroke, dehydration, and exhaustion killed in numbers that far exceeded deaths in battle. Here nature did not stand apart from the system of labor. It completed it. A common misconception must be corrected. Most builders of the Great Wall did not die in a single dramatic catastrophe. Their deaths were prolonged, painful processes. Endless labor steadily stripped the body of its strength. Minor injuries festered for months because of infection and malnutrition. Immune systems collapsed under sustained hunger and cold, until an ordinary fever was enough to carry a life away. The terse, chilling lines in historical records, describing corpses scattered along the roads, point precisely to this reality. Bodies worn down systematically, day after day, between work sites and barracks. The Great Wall rose, stone by stone, inside this vast mill that ground human lives into its foundation. The physical scale of the Great Wall is widely seen as a triumph of engineering, but that scale is inseparable from another measure: the vast number of human life that was consumed in order to raise it. The Great Wall is evidence of a state's capacity to convert will into structure, to turn authority into the organized expenditure of human bodies and human time. Stone, brick, and tamped earth are only its visible materials. The invisible ones are years of labor, broken bodies, and lives that ended without record. What stands today as a monument is also the final product of a long process of human consumption. Its endurance is tied to another, more troubling form of endurance: the fact that the lives erased in its making remain embedded in the history it represents. At its core, this is a story about systems and loss, about how power organizes labor and treats death as a cost of construction. Yet even within such systems, the effort to survive persists. People still tried to endure. They observed, adapted, shared remedies, and developed small ways to stay alive inside a structure that wore life down. That knowledge, born not from comfort, but from necessity, belongs to the same history. Alongside this slow destruction, another reality existed: the practical knowledge people forged simply to survive.